now we come to the presentation by Professor Madonsela. I don't think she needs much introduction as a person, as a public figure. She was born in Soweto in 1962. Grew up under circumstances that I'm sure had some challenges. I've listened to a radio presentation once where she told part of her story, and it was really touching to realize as a person that overcome a lot of challenges in her life. She is a mother of 2 children, which she raised as a single mother. She did her BA Law at the University of Swaziland, LLB at Wits. And then from 2009 to 2016, she acted as the public protector of the Republic, and I think that's when most of us took notice of Professor Madonsela. She's currently professor at the University of Stellenbosch in the chair of social justice. She holds honorary doctorates from the University of Stellenbosch, UCT, Fort Hare, Rhodes, and the Northwest University. And I actually should have said this while the dean was here. There's still an opening for the University of Pretoria to do something in this regard. Looking at her curriculum vitae, one can say for many years she was a protector, in a sense protector of us all. At the moment she's a professor. This morning she's a presenter. And I think when we look at the way that she's done her work as protector, as professor, as presenter, she's also a prophet, speaking truth to power, which is what prophecy is supposed to be. I think some of us can imagine a future where someone like Professor Madonsela can be, shall we say, president of something. the protector, the professor, the presenter, the prophet. We need people like that to be presidents. But this morning, we are privileged to have you in our midst. Thank you for taking the time to being with us. We know you've got a very busy schedule. Thank you for being here. Thank you for honoring us with your presence and with what you have to present to us.
Good morning. Thank you for the privilege to be here, and thank you for presenting us with this opportunity to think about remembering, forgetting, and living imaginatively. We meet at a very crucial time in the history of our country, the continent, and the world, where everyone is looking for answers, because generally everyone thinks this is not where they had expected us to be right now in 2019. In South Africa, for example, many people are asking what happened to the new dawn. Not so long ago, particularly from the beginning of last year, there was a wave of hope, and that wave of hope had a theme, the new dawn, and it continued for most of last year, but suddenly people think, what happened to it? Was it a new dawn? Did we confuse dawn for dusk? And what has made people start wondering whether we ever had a new dawn or not? One of the things that have happened to us is violence. We experiencing unprecedented heights of violence. And it's not so much the frequency with which it happens, it's also the horrific forms it takes. and the most vulnerable of our people it targets. Children are its most victims. Young women are a key group of victims. Older persons, including those who are living in isolated places such as farms, foreigners, people with disabilities, people in the LGBTI community. Just about everyone who is, for whatever reason, considered less than or devalued has been targeted for some form of violence, and that has frightened us as a nation, because we have a constitution that promises us a better life, the free potential of every person, and improved quality of life of every person. We had started to doubt whether that constitution is going to become reality, and suddenly, when President Ramaphosa was elected in the ANC, we started talking about the new dawn, and when he was finally appointed as President of South Africa, again we were happy. The narrative of a new dawn continued, and when he was elected as President of the country beginning of this year, or a few months ago, we were happy about the consolidation of the new dawn. But suddenly, the violence reminded us that we're not in Canaan yet, if we use biblical language. For those who are poor, suddenly going without food for 3 days at a row reminded them that we're not there yet. Unemployment at 30%, poverty at 55.5% across groups, and 1% in the white community, 64.2% among those who are classified as black and African. Water problems, environmental challenges, you name it. Every human social challenge seems to be with us at the moment. I want to challenge you, dear colleagues, this morning as fellow Christians. Most of you, I believe, are fellow Christians. To think carefully about this new dawn. Is it gone? Or is it just cloudy? You can't have a morning that starts very bright and you can see the sun's rays as the sun rises. But suddenly there are clouds. And you could be forgiven for thinking that dawn is gone and night is back. But if the new dawn has to translate into a new day that is filled with the dreams behind our Constitution, behind the UN Declaration on Human Rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, we must lead the process of breaking this dawn into a new day. Many are saying it's President Ramaphosa and the African National Congress, and they're saying if we're failing, it's because we're failing. If both South Africa is sinking, it's their fault. Well, for me, it doesn't matter whose fault is it, but what are we going to do going forward? And as I was thinking about what I'm going to do going forward, I thought about a story of remembering to forget. In a village far away, there was a girl whose childhood was stolen. She was never allowed to go to school because the family needed her to look after the family's buffaloes. They're like cattle. I know here you only see them in the wild or on TV. Those who don't go to the wild like some of us. And after looking after buffaloes, by the age of 9, she was married off to a man who was 20 years older than her. So at the age of 9, she was married to somebody who was 30. By the time she turned 19, she was the mother of 3 boys. At the age of 19, most of us haven't even started thinking about having the first child. You're still worried about just getting that degree or your second degree if you worked fast enough. She was the mother of 3 children, a wife. or somebody who was 20 years older than me, and she was pregnant with a baby girl. And she was living in a village where somebody was corrupt, paying the villagers less than the minimum required, and everyone was scared of this guy because he behaved like the mafia. And this young girl thought this was unjust, this was improper, this was wrong. She refused to look the other way. She took a stand and she became a whistleblower. She told the police took action, there was consequence, impunity was ended. But as many whistleblowers know that when you tell on somebody who's doing something wrong, you paid for that most of the time. This evil man came to exact revenge on this young girl, or young woman at this age. She's 19, and decided to tell her husband that this woman was loose. She was living around in the village with many men, including himself, and that the baby in her belly was his. And then and asked the husband to kill the wife. And the wife kicked, the husband kicked this young woman, kicked her in the belly several times until she was unconscious, and the husband thought she was dead. He didn't have her dead, threw her in a hole where there were buffaloes and cows to make sure that she would be stampeded on, and then the villagers would think that she wasn't murdered, that she was killed by the stampede, and she was left for dead. And the story goes that actually the relatives of the husband were aware of all of this, and they kept coming to check that she wasn't waking up, to make sure she was not waking up, that she was truly dead. So this was at night, and it turned out that actually she didn't die. And when she gained consciousness, she found that one of the cows was standing over her, and that prevented the stampede. She gave birth under that cow to a baby girl and took a piece of rock to cut the umbilical cord and then left. We're told that she made a pledge to the cow that because the cow had helped her, she was going to help humanity as well. She kept her pledge. But in the beginning of her life, things were tough because nobody wanted her. She lived in a crematorium for quite some time, cooking food using the fire that is used to burn dead bodies. And eventually she tried to kill herself. And while she was trying to kill herself on a railway track, she saw a man crying, or she heard a man cry. So if you're lying on the track, you're not going to see who's crying. You can just hear the excruciating sound of sorrow. And if you're compassionate, that's going to jack you up into action. And because of her compassion, she rose to go and find out who's crying. And when she found this man, the man was saying it was an older man who was hungry. Which went to the market to beg for his friend, gave him food. And at that moment, she realized that her life had been spared because her life was not useless. Her life had a purpose. She began to think that there were perhaps many people like that man that were hungry, that needed a person like her to make a difference. And the story goes, she started an orphanage, and eventually one day this man came. A man came who was 8 years, and by this time this young girl was 16. Her name was Cindy Sapko. Cindy Sapko was now 60. This man who was 80 was looking for shelter. And she looked at him very carefully and she realized this is the husband who tried to kill her. What would you have done? Would you have pulled out your heart and said, "You harmed me"? Sinditai chose to remember to forget. She chose to forget to remember the pain, not to forget the incident. She chose to forgive the son, and she let him stay in the shelter as one of the children, not as the husband. For me, what I have learned from the story, which was sent by a Christian friend of mine, Susan Masako, is we cannot choose what happens to us in life. Terrible things happen to us. But at any given stage, we have the power to choose how we're going to respond. This is what Viktor Frankl said. And if you think it's said by people who've never really known pain, Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor. He didn't just experience the pain of being tortured. He experienced the pain of seeing friends, relatives, and acquaintances being killed every day. But he chose to believe that you can choose to forget the pain, not to forget what caused it. You have to remember, because if you don't remember the evil things that have happened in history, history has a way of repeating itself. But we don't just have to remember to forget, to remind ourselves to forget the pain. We also have to remember to remember. Remind ourselves to remember. And one person who reminded himself to remember is Pitki Kayisa Kasem. She was raised as a Christian, and like me, he was raised as a Christian, and like me, he was raised to believe there's no color to the soul. And when we were kids, we had this song that we sang, "Oh, the colors of the rainbow, saints radiant that God shall call. Red and yellow, black and white shall grow to know there's no color to the soul." But he went to America at the time of racism, having been raised at a mission where he had been told that his soul had no color, and the missionaries had helped him to get an education. He goes to Yale. He lives in America at the time of Jim Crow laws, and he realizes that here he is treated as nothing. But he chose not to forget. He chose to remember that the way he was raised was that there was no color to the soul. But he also remembered that the way he was raised was that as a Christian, it was his job to be the light that brings fire to the world, or to be the candle that brings light to the world. And he chose to do that. At the age of 19, more than 100 years ago, this young black person at the time of racism and colonialism wrote an essay that won accolades, and it even got published because he didn't judge himself by the circumstances he found himself in. But he also didn't choose to fight fire with fire. He chose to live life according to his own values, according to his own principles, and his own principles were every soul is worthy. And that those who are Christians are people who believe they're Christ-like. It's their job to bring peace and love to the world. He wrote, and in that essay, he spoke about Africa was going to rise. And Africa was going to be a midwife to a new world. And that new world was going to be a world based on Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is something that is universal. In Africa, here in Africa, when I was growing up, you distinguish between a person who's Ubuntu and a person who has Ubuntu. If we say you have Ubuntu, you are Ubuntu, we meant you are a quintessential human being. You have all the attributes of humanity. And what is humanity again? Because you are. I have compassion for you, and I assume you have compassion for you. I have solidarity with you. It's not just about my survival. I care about your survival because together we are formidable against the elements. And then if you had attributes of cruelty, of theft, of lying, of corruption, we would say Unubulwan. But today I even wonder whether we are fair when they say we distinguish between Ubuntu and Isilwa. We have Ubuntu, we have Ubulwane, because I go to the wild, my family and I, we go to the wild and we see how social animals behave. They don't behave like cruel human beings. Think about elephants. When one is hurt, they see an injury to one to be an injury to all, which is the essence of Ubuntu. And we were touched, I think it was last year, when an elephant had a baby elephant that was stuck in a ditch and the mother struggled to take it out until a mother from a different group came in and helped. And while she was helping in, her own head created a buffer between lions and the lunch that the lions were preparing themselves for. What would we do if we're humans today? Would we look the other way, or would we be good Samaritans? Do we think the Good Samaritan is just a biblical thing, or it is part of life? Well, Kingsley didn't just write that poem about humanity. He worked. He was one of the people in this world who created the kinds of words that eventually found themselves in the UN Charter on Human and People's Rights, and eventually in the UN Declaration on Human Rights, and then later the Freedom Charter. But it was all about all humans are born equal, and everything followed. So if we're saying the new dawn is gone, what do we need to do going forward? Dear colleagues, I think we have to remember the dream, and I like what you're saying here today about living imaginatively. If you're living imaginatively, you've got to have a dream, you've got to have an idea, a picture of where you're going. What does the picture of I have arrived look like? And that's a question I asked people who attended the social justice conference. And I said, we argue about what are we going to do to move forward and what pathways are we going to take. But part of the reason we do that is because we've got different ideas of where are we going. So I asked the panelists, where are we going? What does the picture look like when we say we've arrived at the South Africa of our dreams? It was remarkable. The picture was the same for everyone. Mr. de Klerk, Barry Turok, Ellen Zille, Adam Habib, young people. It was amazing. We all had the same picture. A South Africa where everyone's humanity is embraced. An Africa where everyone's humanity is embraced. A world where everyone's humanity is embraced. Where we live harmoniously. Where there's no hunger. Where nobody is excluded from any opportunity in any space in life. We have to remember that constitutional dream. It's not a new thing. This is the same dream that propelled people like Charlotte Macaulay, Olive Schreiner, and Pixley Gassene. They believed that if we want peace, we had to look for justice. Because as long as there's injustice somewhere, there can't be sustainable peace. In my life, that dream of a world where every soul is equal where there's no color to the soul. That's what has propelled me to do things that I've done. I was a public protector before I became the public protector. Because I believe you can't be the public protector if you're not a public protector before you were given the title. You cannot lead with a title if you've never led without a title. These titles are not instructive titles. They're not titles for us to extract careers. Those titles affirm what we already are. One of the songs that the Tumor Foundation sings, that it used to be sang at my church. I was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist and as a Methodist, and I even went to the Zion church with my grandmother. So I was that kind of person who went to church 3 times a weekend and then dance Sabbath school during the week as well. But one of our songs that the Tumor Foundation has suddenly resuscitated is This Little Light of Mine. Remember that song? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. So if we do remember the dream, if we do believe we are the light of the world, do we still believe that we are where we are because we've been failed by President? Yesterday I was at EOH, where the CEO of EOH, Stephen, said if everyone who had a certain level of means were to raise 11 people, there would be no poverty and hunger in this world. I was raised in a church where really, if you were Seventh-day Adventist, you'd never go hungry, ever. Because everyone was attuned to each other's lives. We knew who needed food, we knew who needed medical attention, we knew who needed to have their homes cleaned because they were at that particular stage. Even if you wanted to get married and you didn't have the money, all you needed to do was to say, I want to get married, and all of us will be mobilized to do everything, from flowers to cooking, etc. So what has happened to that Ubuntu, that human solidarity? I am because we are. I remember when we, as a public protector team, had to go to Cleveland's for stuff. We have been told as human beings that people are dying there. Women and children are afraid and they get killed. And nobody was doing anything. They were saying that the police are not doing what they're supposed to do. In fact, the police are part of the problem. Now remember when we first raised it, my team said, hey, people die in the NPP, we're not going there. And I wasn't going to compel staff to go there when they're going to die. And then I said to my deputy, I'm going to go with the police and with my protectors, because my protector said, they're with me, we were going to go. And my deputy said he was going to come. And then suddenly, a whole group of staff members followed. Because I think it was Roosevelt, if I'm not mistaken, President Roosevelt, who said, when one person stands up for something good, the spines of others are strengthened. And when we chose to do this, though, it wasn't because we were not afraid. I don't think bravery means you have no fear whatsoever. I think bravery is about looking fear in the face and transcending it because you believe that there's something more important than that which you fear. And you believe that that which you want to accomplish is far more important than the thing that you fear. And we did that. And in the end, we were able to uncover the truth about what was going there. That it wasn't just about hostel beds. Yes, it had an element of hostel beds. But there was a huge issue of poverty and human degradation. People living in one hostel room, 3 families. And in some cases, husband and wife, or or partners. And you would ask, I mean, there was one case where I asked this couple, this young fellow who was living with a family, and I asked, what do you do when they're having intimate moments? He said, I just pull the blanket over my head and pretend I'm not here. Now if you have to live that pretend life, where you have to shut out yourself out of your humanity consistently, what happens to your soul? Doesn't something die in you? And isn't that part of the reason we have that violence? Where people have had to step out of some of their humanity or pieces of their humanity in order to cope with the subhuman conditions that life has visited on. So, dear colleagues, I'm raising these stories with you not to condemn us, but to say that we have so many possibilities. We just have to remember who we are. And we've been reminded by the lovely sermon this morning about not only are we all many gods created in the image of God. Not all. It's not enough that there is a divinity in all of us. In all of us. Not some. Including the cruel people, like such as the men who killed women. He is still created by God and in the image of God. So there's a piece of God in that person. But we are also redeemed, those of us who believe in Christ. We also believe in addition to being made in the image of God and having all of those powers that were given to us, we were redeemed. So, in moving South Africa forward, what is our challenge? Is it enough to stand on top of mountains complaining about corruption? The decision I personally made after the attacks I received in response to my decision in Nkandla, this house leases, Meatball, etc. On the point of fairness, when I got to a point where my team and I were alone, because every political party was angry with us, we decided to press on because we believed in the dream. We believed that if this boat has to land where the constitutional dream wants it to go, if humanity has to be restored to social cohesion, injustice must be fought. Whether it's the injustice of corruption, or injustice of discrimination, or injustice of poverty, or injustice of social-economic exclusion as a result of the legacy of our unjust past, be it apartheid, colonialism, patriarchy, disability discrimination, LGBTI discrimination, urban rural discrimination, but all of those are realities of our work. When I chose to go to work at Stellenbosch University, I didn't go there because there was no other job. And I didn't go there because I was paid for working for white monopoly capital. The trolls who say that they really think that my life is cheap, because this is basically a job without a title. And this is the least paid of all of the offers that I got from domestic to international. I went there because I genuinely believe that democracy is in crisis. But with the crisis of democracy, peace in this country, in our continent, and in the world is under threat. Because as long as there's injustice somewhere, there can't be sustainable peace. And poverty is an injustice, suicide human rights, human created. At the very least, we can end poverty. And that's what the UN thinks we can. They said so under the Millennium Development Goals. They believe so under the Sustainable Development Goals. That the one thing that we can truly end is poverty. Nobody should live like a subhuman being. And that's one of really the bastard children of capitalism, is poverty. That was one of our t-shirts, by the way, as a trade unionist. It will say, fight poverty, the bastard child of capitalism. That was the National Union of Printers and Allied Workers. And we're still battling it. But the good thing, though, is that companies under the UN Global Compact are with us now to say poverty serves no purpose. We can deal with it. And the CEO of this one company thinks we can do it. I also believe that we can do it. Not necessarily in terms of that model. My son there from Tuna Foundation says, for example, we could get every company to adopt a ward out of 4,392 wards. But I know you are also saying there's something that has to happen, something has to give, corruption must fall. Because one of the problems behind poverty is the wasted opportunities in the last 25 years. And key to that waste has been corruption. So we have an opportunity in terms of using the Sustainable Development Goals to move forward, but we also have an opportunity using the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly goal number 16, for me, you, and anyone else who has a view to help government to strengthen the state. Because why in this boat? If the crew is weak, we're going down. If we have a view on how the crew should manage, we can become members of the crew ourselves, or we can help capacitate the queue. What's in store for us if things go wrong? Just an ending, guys. As Christians, please read the poem, The Cold Within. It was written by a Christian, James Patrick Kinney, in the 60s, because he was worried about what was happening in the world and the conflict that was happening in his country. He wrote the poem, The Cold Within. It is about 6 people who happen to be together in a cold, dark night. They all have a log in their hand and there's a dying fire. Each one has an opportunity to throw the log in the fire, and none would do it. The first one won't do it because they see somebody who's not a Christian, who's not from their church, not even from a different faith. They see somebody who's not from the church, they don't do it. The second one looks around and sees a black person, they're white, and they say, no, this black person is not going to benefit from my log. The next one is a rich person who sees the poor person and says, the lazy poor, they're not going to get my log. Then the poor person sees the rich person and thinks, no, the poor, the rich people, I'm not going to give them my log. A black person looks around and sees all of these white people and says, time for revenge, they've exploited me for all my lifetime, they're not going to get my log. And the last person is one of those people who really will never give anyone anything but for gain. You know those friends, the ones who won't give you money unless they can claim it from SARS. You know them, yes. So that's the last one. Then the sixth man looks around and says, no, I'm not going to claim anything from SARS, and these guys are not going to pay me. He keeps his log. And James Patrick Kinney talks about the hands, the dead, still hands, still holding on those logs, were a symbol of their sin. And he says they did not die from the cold without. They died from the cold within. I think our country and the world is challenging us to find that little light in ourselves and be the light of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Madonsela. I had the feeling while I was sitting there, I just hoped this hour was not going to end, that you'll just keep on talking and blessing us with your presence and with your wisdom. I was struck by the fact that he said you don't become the public protector, but you are the public protector, and then it is affirmed. And challenging all of us to be public protectors, whether we are officially in that position. So if you take that further, we can say you are the president, even though you're not in it. Friends, we have a few moments. We have tea and coffee and refreshments at 10:30. We've got a few minutes to spare. If any one of you want to respond to what Professor Madonsela has said, or want to ask a question, or to add to what she has said, you are welcome. She's challenged us by saying, well, she grew up in a situation where no one ever went hungry, no one ever went without shelter because people took care of each other. We are being challenged in this regard today. One of our participants in the conference is looking for a place to stay. He comes from Rustenburg. Hy is een van ons proponente wat nog nie 'n beroep het nie. En hy is 'n getroue konferensieganger en ek het vir hom gesê, kom konferensie toe, ek is seker ons gaan vir jou 'n slaapplek kry. Freddie de Lange het vir die konferensie slaapplek nodig. En ek het gesê, hy is welkom om saam met my terug te ry huis toe in Johannesburg en weer terug te ry, maar as hy dan so 'n uur of wat gespaar kan kry, 'n bietjie 'n uur langer kan slaap of 'n uur later kan opstaan. As daar iemand van u is wat dalk 'n slaapplek het, hier in Pretoria, kom na my toe, en dan sal ons reël dat Freddie dalk by julle thuis gaan. Anyone that wants to ask any questions or to respond to the woman, lady in front.
Morning, Prof. I still remember in 2016, I think, I was watching TV and I decided to scroll through the channels. And just as I was fed up with the nothingness that was showing on the others, I came across your interview, but you were about to finish. I still remember those final 5 minutes, and actually 3. And the one thing that you say, the interviewer asked you, how did you become who you are now? How did you become this exceptional leader? And you say, in order to lead, you do not go out seeking positions, but you go out seeking to serve. And those are my values. That's one of the biggest values with which I was raised. So it did resonate with me. I was 24, 25 then. And I mean, life happened. I still remember in 2017, as I was working on my master's program, I lost my mother, my brother, my grandmother, all in 1 year. But I was just like, because of the vision I had to serve, I had to keep going. And by the age of 27, my country appointed me to be the youngest ever director of a public listed company. And I still remember when I was asked about how it feels to be the youngest, I responded to one of the captains of industry, and I just told them straight up, sorry, I'm Primrose Scratch. I told them straight up, I don't look at my age. I'm shouldering the responsibility as much as you are. And again, one Forbes guy asked me, on the Forbes list, he asked me what I'm going to do with this opportunity. And I told him, I'm going to serve, that's all I know. And I've heard profound leaders talk about service, and I was laughed at. And immediately the warrior in me responded, just watch this space. How do I hold on to that value of service till I die?
This morning, I just want to tap into something that you said, and it's very important for our country. We are living in a time and age where the country is failing. And you referred to it when you spoke about the laws, everybody keeping this law because he can't help the other. Now my question would be, yes, we realize that the country is failing. We realize that South Africa, we are in groups, the rich and the poor, the educated and the uneducated. We are so much subdivided than we used to be. to a point where everything that happens that touches us as human beings in this country, we refer it to them. It is us and them in everything that we do. The rich, the poor, the educated, the uneducated, the white, the blacks. We go on and on dividing ourselves. The question will be, how do we begin to start working together? To destroy the boundaries that we put for ourselves. To start building our children as South Africans, not as black, not as white, not as rich, not as poor, not as rural, not as urban, but as South Africans where everybody is in order and everybody will remain something for the country.
Thank you very much. Morning, Prof. I'm a student at DAX doing theology. I would just reflect that the church was radical before 1994. When I'm saying church, the black church. But 25 years later, the church is silent. And now we have got a lot of challenges that are emerging in our country. But to be more contextual, we have seen the challenges as the abuse of women and children and so on and so on. But now, how can we as the church stop from releasing statements saying amen? Just to make myself clear, all the churches, even the SACC, the SAC, South African Council of Churches, and other organizations have been releasing statement issues saying they condemn the abuse of women and children and xenophobic attacks. But then we are not active, we are not seen on the streets being political, if I may say. So now all of the churches, even my faculty, has released the statement saying they condemn these issues. But then how can we act? You just said in your presentation that we have been complaining about corruption and so on. But is there anything, if I have to ask a question from you, that is there anything we can do as blacks and whites, as church, to fight against corruption and everything that is happening in our country? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm been living out of the country for about 16 months now, and I came home just March, and this is the second time that I've come home this year. And I think the type of response that I felt coming home the first time was extremely excited, as a woman. And then all of a sudden, when I came home now, I was so vigilant about how I move about in the country. And so, when we sit outside of the country, we are very quiet. I think one of the things is that we don't know what to say, because when I say I hate what's happening to women, to my friends in South Africa, they say, you don't know what's going on. You are outside, you're protected where you are. So I think one of my things is, and something that we're trying to move forward on, is as those that have left the country, how can we assist in such a way that actually is impactful for somebody that's actually living in South Africa? Because it's all great for me to preach how bad it is when I'm flying next week Friday and I'll be out of the country. So how can we help if we are not in the country per se? Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleagues, for those thought-provoking questions and comments. To your question, Primrose, on how do you maintain that paradigm of service as opposed to a paradigm of extracting privilege or extracting money or whatever other people are sent to positions for. It's always about what can they extract from this, and then things fall apart. Just continue. Because I suspect you serve not because you burden me. You serve because you feel you are a product of grace. That you yourself have been served in many kind of ways in your life. And it's your way of paying it forward. Certainly in my case, I never woke up and decided I want to serve. Yes, in church we were encouraged to serve, but in my growing up, I always felt that I was a recipient of grace. Grace, just the fact that we're in this world, because it was love that was behind our creation. It was love behind our redemption. But you don't have to be a Christian to feel love, to be anchored in creating a world that is based on love. You don't have to be a Christian, because love doesn't hurt. And so you don't have to believe in 1 Corinthians 13. You just have to understand that if the world were to be anchored in love, service would be at the core of it. And we see it among animals. We see it in primitive societies, that sense of human solidarity. But my last advice to you is, if you choose to serve, if you choose to go for positions based on what you can extract from those positions, you're going to be sad. Because when you do what you love, when the storms come, it's going to be love that keeps you going. Certainly in my life as a corporate protector, when the storms came, it was the fact that I was where I needed to be. I've always loved humanity, I've always loved justice for as long as I remember. When I was in my late teens, I helped to save people from the death penalty because somebody just told me the story. The sisters of the people who told them the story. I was a trade unionist there working for nothing, just during my school holidays, just doing it because it was the right thing to do. And they told me, as a young lawyer, I thought this was wrong. And I went and found Priscilla Jana, who believed in me, and we saved these young people from Pakistan, from the death penalty, wrongly convicted on the basis of the common people purpose principle. So when things go wrong, my daughter here was here at Visit of Pretoria during Business 4. She didn't start with Business 4 Wednesday, she started with Jackson, a guy who was sleeping in a toilet because she had no accommodation. And when some of these students were waiting for accommodation, she kept them in her flat, and one of them she eventually brought to her house. Not because she had a position, it wasn't part of her job, it was empathy, compassion, fulfillment. But it keeps you going because then you focus on purpose. For me, I found that love keeps me anchored. It gives me a sense of faith that humanity is going to come to the party and hope that tomorrow is going to be better than tomorrow. And I said to people that that verse that we only read in movies, 1 Corinthians 13, is a verse that we can live on every day. Love, conflict. Because we do need to be hopeful and we do need to ignite and sustain hope. Because when hope dies, things fall apart. But that's all I can say to you on this, is that the colleague who is concerned, how on earth do we live together in harmony? The Constitution says we must. The Bible says we must. So what's missing is us stepping up. I've learned from somebody by the name of Dorothy Chung, who's saying, part of the reason people remain racist, sexist, bigoted against people who are not heterosexuals, xenophobic, bigoted against older persons, and just people who are not like them, is part of it is the search for goodness. By wanting to be seen as good people, become bad people. You see that? Because when a company, for example, in South Africa is attacked of being racist, they immediately tell us about one of the good things they've done because they know it's a bad thing to be racist. But how can we not be racist? How can we not be sexist? How can we be age prejudiced in a society that planted those seeds in us from the day we were born? How can a new constitution change us like that overnight? It can't. So we have to work at it, at discovering our prejudices and working with them. And that's what Judge Catherine Marshall, former Chief Justice of Massachusetts, who was a former South African. She used to be a member of NUSAS in South Africa, since she was acting president of NUSAS. That was a student movement against apartheid. He tells us the thing is not to say you're not racist, you're not sexist, you're not bigoted against disability. The thing is to keep trying to do better. So every time you're confronted with deciding something between somebody who looks like you, who acts like you, and somebody who doesn't look like you, ask yourself what prejudices may be appearing. When I was a public protector, for example, I used to tell my colleagues, my staff, that remember people who dress like that, who are educated like us, will speak more eloquently, more respectfully, and will find it easy to resonate with them. And then people who have been harmed by the system, who are poor, will come dressed shabbily, they will be rough in their language, and it's easy to disbelieve. So you need to look at what elements of what sociologists refer to as homosocialism are in play when we deal with people, because we tend to gravitate towards the familiar. So who do we believe? Something that looks familiar. Who do we know? Who do we have compassion for? I'll tell you just a quick story about something that struck me. A very good person is a friend of a friend. When Uyinene was raped and killed, in a private setting, I showed this colleague who was just sitting as a group, and I said, look, this person is just been killed. Very good person looked at this picture and says, well, she is a little underdressed, you know. One could say that is an invitation. That's the dress where Uyinene she's not showing breasts or anything. She's just wearing a white, innocent 19-year-old blouse. So but you could relate to this person and see the people to be evil and you don't want to see them ever again. Or you could understand that they're simply reflecting the prejudices that society has germinated on them, has seeded in their beings. And you could work with them to talk about that and win them over. So I would say about how do we start living together. Firstly, we already live together. That's what the Tollback Foundation says. So how on earth can we live together? We already do. The question is, how do we live on earth harmoniously and sustainably? And we can do it. And then the student who said, what can we do to help? When we see abuse, beyond just condemning it, issue statements, what can we do? At the Thuli Foundation at Stellenbosch University, when we organize these events, we divide what needs to be done into 3 stages. What am I doing? Before I ask what are they doing, I say, what am I doing? Because we learned from Mama Sisulu, Helen Joseph, and all of those women before us. The first question they asked, Sophia Dubrain, was, what am I doing? The second question is, what will I do? So even before you go to the others, is, what am I doing? What will I do to end the pain, to end the suffering? And then the third question is, who will I approach to join me to connect my life to solve this problem? Who will I work? Who's we? I, we. And then they is the last part of the inquiry. Who are they somewhere there that we're going to ask to stop doing certain things, to start doing certain things, and to join us? I honestly think that social injustice will be achieved in this world if we go through this three-stage approach. Think about Bear's idea from this church, expelled from his community. He didn't keep just pointing at the wrongs of apartheid, which he did. He taught the same university where I'm teaching this way. He, beyond condemning the wrong and trying to tell his colleagues that yes, fighting for justice is a good thing, but justice is not the same thing as just us. Justice is justice for all. But he also worked for justice for all. If it wasn't for him, I would not be having my second degree. My LLB, the reason I got it was Media's agency that paid for my second degree. The very first degree that I have, again, John Daniel, expelled from this country for fighting for justice, goes to Scotland, can't come back here. Yes, he continues to talk about apartheid, but that was not enough. He made it his decision that no child, no South African child would be excluded from university because of that. All you needed to do is you have a place at the university and they tell you, where do you go and find John Daniel? That's how I got my first degree.
That is my privilege, Professor, to thank you again for being with us, for blessing us with not only your presence but with your wisdom. Thank you for what you meant for so many of us as a beacon of hope in our country, as an example of, I like what you said, not being fearless, but being courageous, in spite of being fearful. I think we need more people like that. And thank you for challenging us here at the very end to say, start by asking, what am I doing? And what will I do? Instead of asking, what are they doing and what should they be doing? I've got a small token of our appreciation that I want to hand to you. We are sure that you have a book or two, but we are giving you a small token to say, buy a book that will remind you of us and remind you of this blessed moment that you shared here with us. And thank you again for being here and for being